War drains the color out of everything. Mud, uniforms, faces, even the sky, all the same dead gray. Everything except one ridiculous splash of color. A bright village-style scarf on the neck of a recon soldier with the call sign, shawl. It looked like a mistake. Big flowers, folk patterns, cheap fabric. The kind of scarf old women wear to the market when they argue over potatoes and sugar. Here, among burned tree lines, shattered houses, and trenches ripped open by shells, it looked like it had slipped in from another world and never found the way back. From the first day, that scarf drew fire, not from the enemy, but from his own. They met him at a staging area near the front line. Engines idled, radios spat half-words and static. Someone fought with a jammed magazine, someone else cursed the cold. And in the middle of this gray mess, one tall, lean soldier, rifle on his shoulder, and that absurd, colorful scarf around his neck. One of the older fighters stared at him. "Hey, you," he called. "You going to war or to a village fair?" Another didn't even look up from cleaning his weapon. "This isn't a market, brother. Lose the circus costume." The platoon commander walked past, gave the scarf a short, annoyed glance. "Take that off," he said flatly. "You'll light yourself up. You want every enemy drone to see you first?" The soldier with the scarf adjusted the knot instead of removing it. "Permission to keep it, sir," he said quietly. "Personal sign, from home." The commander had already turned away. "On the front, your sign is your call sign and your blood type," he snapped. "Not grandma's fashion. 5 minutes, then I don't want to see that rag." No one argues with a commander over a scarf, but 5 minutes later, when the unit moved out, the scarf was still there. Not bright and loose on his chest anymore, tucked under the vest, one end wrapped around his wrist like a band. It still flashed in gaps between his gear, still out of place. Still wrong for this landscape. No one asked what it meant to him. Nobody really asked about before the war at all. Back then, it had just been part of his childhood. A small village house, a wooden bench that creaked under any weight, steam rising from a pot of boiled potatoes, and an old woman in a faded dress, always with that same pattern on her shoulders. His grandmother. When he was a kid, she tied that scarf around her head before going to the market. Same pattern, same red flowers, same yellow threads worn thin by sun and rain. He remembered her laugh, the way she scolded him for climbing roofs, the way she tore the scarf off her own shoulders and threw it around his neck when the wind picked up. "Here," she would say, "so I can see you from far away, so you don't get lost in the crowd." Back then, the crowd meant a few hundred people and a noisy Saturday market. Now, the crowd was an endless front line, and getting lost could mean never coming back. When he left for the war, she didn't cry in front of him. She just folded that scarf slowly, smoothing the fabric with hands bent by age, and put it in his palm. "So that yours can always see you," she said, "and so that strangers pass you by." He almost smiled at the superstition, a piece of cloth against artillery, drones, and snipers, but her hands were shaking, so he didn't smile. He shoved the scarf into his bag and took it with him to the front. Now, here, it had turned into a problem. In the dugout, under a low ceiling that rained dirt with every nearby explosion, the jokes circled him like flies. "Hey, Shawl," a sniper smirked. "Does your grandma handle logistics for our brigade?" "Careful with that thing," another added. "Enemy drones might go blind. Secret weapon." Even under fire, someone found time to shout from the trench, "Cover that rag, man! We're trying to stay alive, not decorate the position." He didn't explain. Not about the house, not about the market, not about the shaking hands that had folded the fabric. He just kept wearing it, sometimes on his neck, sometimes wrapped tight around his wrist, sometimes pulled over the strap of his vest like a makeshift band. Not to be funny, not to be stubborn, because he had already noticed something the others hadn't. From a distance, in that sea of identical helmets and vests, this stupid scarf stood out like a flare. On the third week at the front, that detail stopped being a quirk and started being the difference between living and dying. It happened at night. No moon. Only the dull flashes of distant artillery and the sharp, rude bursts of rifles cutting holes in the dark. Their recon team moved ahead of the main positions, 5 shadows stretched into a thin line crawling through wet, black ground. Ahead, the enemy tree line. Behind, their own positions, their own observation post, their own sniper staring through glass into the same thick darkness. In the observation post, behind a cold scope, all silhouettes looked equally dangerous. Crouched shapes, short, fast sprints, pauses, no bright patches, no clear markings, just moving shadows, all equally worth shooting. The sniper breathed slowly, cheek pressed to the stock. Someone behind him whispered coordinates. On the radio, a calm voice kept repeating, "Watch the group at 2 o'clock. If it's not ours, mark it. We're not letting anyone walk up on us." Out in the field, the recon team slid forward, every motion measured. They were already in the gray zone, that strip of ground where both sides shoot first and sort it out later over bodies and dog tags. There, friend and enemy exist only in someone's head or in someone's crosshair. The soldier with the scarf moved second in line, low, silent, rifle close to his chest. The fabric on his wrist was pulled under his glove, but a small tail of the scarf stuck out, dirty and frayed. It itched. Out of habit, he paused for half a second and pulled it free, rewrapping it higher on his wrist so it wouldn't rub on the weapon grip. Up in the observation post, in the sniper's scope, a tiny shape moved. A dark figure lifted an arm, and for a fraction of a second, something patterned flashed against all that black. The sniper frowned and adjusted focus. There, between broken tree trunks and shadows, one figure had a small, unnatural mark on his arm. Not metal, not gear. Cloth, patterned cloth. He tightened his grip on the rifle. "That's him," he said quietly into the radio. "That's Shawl. He's got that stupid scarf on his wrist again." A voice came through his earpiece, tense. "You sure?" "Positive. I've seen it before. Same pattern, same idiot." There was a brief silence, just static, distant explosions, and someone breathing too close to a microphone. Then, "Copy. Group at 2 o'clock is friendly. Do not engage. Repeat, do not engage." Out in the field, the recon team heard only fragments through the noise. "Eyes on you. Hold course. You're clear." The soldier with the scarf didn't know that a minute earlier, in that same scope, he had almost been a target. He didn't know that a single word, friendly, had just pulled a bullet away from his head. He just heard the 2 clicks on the radio that meant message received and kept crawling. By dawn, soaked and frozen, they slipped back into their own lines. The sniper was waiting near the trench, rifle slung, eyes tired. He glanced at the scarf, stained and muddy, sticking out from under the glove. "I'll still say it," the sniper grunted. "That thing is not regulation." He paused. "But from a couple 100 meters in that mess out there, I saw you because of it." He jerked his chin at the wrist. "Don't overdo it, but keep it where I can see it." One of the men behind them laughed nervously. "Great. New rule. Gray mud. We shoot. Bright flowers. We don't." The others chuckled, tension bleeding out with the joke. The soldier with the scarf didn't answer. He just tightened the knot on his wrist. That night, in the dugout, with the generator humming and a cheap light bulb trembling with every distant blast, he unwrapped the scarf for a moment. The fabric was already torn. On one of the red flowers, a tiny burned hole. A fragment had passed close enough to kiss it and keep going. He held it up to the light. Through the hole, the bulb glowed like a weak, distant sun. The scarf no longer smelled like bread and warm house. It smelled like damp earth, sweat, and smoke. He wrapped it back around his wrist. One quiet thought crossed his mind. If they can see me because of this, maybe we live a bit longer. Over that image, the wrist, the scarf, the flickering light, a narrator's voice could say, "Back then they still treated it as a joke, a superstition, a village habit that didn't belong at war. But war has its own logic. And very soon, that ridiculous scarf would become the only thing standing between his team and their own artillery." By the second month, the front felt less like a line and more like a storm. Everything moved. Nothing stayed where it was yesterday. But the scarf stayed. It was part of him now. Helmet, rifle, vest, and that stubborn strip of color on his wrist. They still called him Shawl, and no one even remembered his real last name anymore. The war had edited it out. One evening, in a cramped room dug into the earth, the company commander stood over a taped-up, dirty map, a single red line stabbed deep into enemy territory. Here, he said. They're rotating in fresh troops and pushing armor. We can't afford guesswork. We need eyes, deeper than before. The recon squad listened in silence. You go past your usual limit, the commander continued. Into this sector. You find their staging points, vehicles, guns. You mark them for our artillery. No side quests, no heroism. Get in, get what we need, get out. Somebody asked, voice hoarse. What about comms? We'll do what we can, the commander said. But don't count on it. They're jamming, and half the brigade is fighting over the same frequencies. Keep it short on the radio. Coordinates, corrections, that's it. No speeches. He tapped the map again. And remember, the front is not a straight line. By the time you're out there, positions might have shifted. Our guys, their guys, lost guys, all over the same ruins. You don't shoot just because something moves, but you don't trust it just because you want it to be friendly either. His gaze slid across the squad and stopped on the bit of scarf showing at one wrist. You, he said. Shawl. Yes, sir. That thing of yours. The commander nodded at the scarf. You keep it, but listen closely now. The room went quiet. I'll pass the word to every observation post and every drone operator. If they see that pattern, they double-check before they fire. That's what I can give you. After that, it's on you not to be in the wrong place. Shawl nodded once. Understood. Good. Then don't lose it, the commander said. Today of all days. Outside, under a weak floodlight, one of the mortar crewmen watched them gear up. So now we've got official scarf signaling, he muttered. Next step, lucky socks in the fire plan. Nobody really laughed, because everybody knew, when everything looks the same on a screen, any tiny difference might be the only thing that keeps steel out of your skin. They stepped off before dawn. Cold air bit through their sleeves. Wet ground swallowed their boots. The sky hung low and heavy, the kind of sky that made sounds feel closer than they really were. They moved in a long, broken line. Short rush, stop, listen, repeat. Behind them, their own trenches faded into mist like they had never existed. By late morning, they were deeper than usual. Too far to sprint back if something went truly wrong. They found the first enemy position by sound, engines idling, metal clanking. Short, sharp orders barked in unfamiliar voices. They slipped into the cover of a shattered tree line overlooking a road. Through blackened branches and gaps in broken concrete, they finally saw what they'd come for. Trucks lined up, crates being dragged off, a self-propelled gun warming up, exhaust coughing into the cold air. Perfect targets, if their own guns could see what they were seeing. Positions, the recon leader whispered. We mark, we call, we don't get clever. They spread out along the tree line, each man finding a patch of shadow to disappear into. Shawl lay flat, cheek against damp earth, eyes fixed on the convoy. The scarf was tight around his wrist, one dirty corner just visible outside his glove. He glanced up at the sky. Nothing but low clouds. Somewhere above them, a small machine buzzed, invisible. Miles away, in a metal container filled with screens, a drone operator stared at a shaky infrared feed. Blurry trucks, blurrier figures, black and white ghosts moving through gray. I've got movement in Sector Delta, he said. Sending picture. A voice answered in his headset. Copy, confirm with recon, we're building a fire plan. Another voice, broken by static, cut through. Visual on targets. Working grid. Wait, signal's dirty. The timing should have been perfect. Recon on the ground. Drone in the sky. Artillery ready to listen. That's when everything started to come apart. First, the interference got worse. Channels overlapped. Voices bled into each other. Half of every sentence was swallowed by noise. Somewhere close, another unit screamed for fire support. Taking heavy? Need cover on grid. Now, now, now. On the digital map at the command post, icons began to drift. A friendly marker slid a few dozen meters off its real position. An enemy marker jumped the other way. On the screen, it looked like groups were merging that in reality were still apart. In the field, the recon leader pressed his headset to his ear. Command, this is recon team. Target convoy located. Sending coordinates. Static clawed the rest of the message to pieces. At the command post, a young officer leaned over his display. There were two clusters of movement in roughly the same slice of land. One, clearly enemy vehicles. The other, small, human-sized dots, half hidden in tree lines and ruins. Whose are those? He asked, pointing at the smaller cluster. No one answered right away. The drone operator zoomed in on the sector. He saw the tree line, broken walls, 5 faint shapes lying close to the edge of cover. It matched where the recon team was supposed to be, but on the map, their tag had drifted just enough to make it uncertain. Could be recon, he said slowly. Could also be enemy skirmishers, hard to tell from here. Do they have any visual markers? The officer asked. Anything at all? The operator remembered the briefing, the commander's tired face, that one extra instruction. There's one of them, he said. Call sign Shawl. Wears a bright village scarf around his wrist or neck, patterned. I've seen it before on another op. The officer stared at him. You want me to bet artillery shells on a scarf? Right now, the operator replied, eyes never leaving the screen. We don't have anything better. On the ground, Shawl felt the tremor in the dirt before he heard it. Artillery. Somewhere not far off, already working another grid. Are they firing for us? One of the recon men whispered. Not yet, the leader answered. Or they're firing at the wrong place. The radio spat out broken words. Mission in queue, other units priority, hold position. Hold position in a place that might at any second be marked as enemy cluster on someone else's screen. Shaw looked at the road again. The convoy was still there. Men were still unloading crates. Engines still ran. If their own side decided that the tree line was hostile, the first shells would land right where his team lay. He pulled the scarf a little higher on his wrist, almost without thinking. Up in the drone feed, a single pixel-sized shape moved just enough. The operator leaned in. Come on, he whispered. Show me something. Give me anything. For a fraction of a second, through the grain and jitter, he saw it. A small, irregular patch on one of the arms. Not pure black, not uniform gray, broken, patterned. There, he said sharply. Freeze that frame. He rolled the footage back by a second, then forward again, inch by inch. A hand shifted. A bit of cloth flashed. Not gear, not metal. Fabric with a messy, repeating pattern. That's him, the operator said. That's Shawl. I've got his scarf. The officer hesitated. Range? Right where recon should be. And the convoy? 50, 60 meters ahead of them. A voice from the artillery net cut in. We're ready on Delta. We have a request to saturate the whole sector, tree line included. Need a final call now. The officer exhaled slowly. If we hit everything, he said, we erase the convoy, and possibly our own recon. Silence, just the hum of electronics and distant thunder of somebody else's war. The operator's eyes stayed on that flicker of pattern. If you see that scarf, the commander had said, you double-check before you fire. I see him, the operator repeated. I'm as sure as I'm going to get from up here. If we hit the whole sector, we bury them with the trucks. He turned, finally looking away from the screen. Sir, we either trust the marker we were given, or we admit we're firing blind. The officer looked back at the map, at the 2 clusters, at the wrong side of the line reality they represented. His jaw clenched. Artillery, this is command, he said into the mic. Adjust fire. Do not hit the tree line. Repeat, do not hit the tree line. Prioritize the road and vehicle cluster only. Copy, the artillery replied. Tree line excluded. Firing on convoy. On the ground, the recon team heard the first shells scream overhead. Down, the leader hissed. The air tore open somewhere in front of them. Impact, light, shrapnel slashing the air above their backs. They hugged the earth as steel rained onto the road. Trucks, crates, men. The world in front of them turned into fire and dirt. None of the shells landed in the tree line. Not one. When the barrage stopped, they risked a look. The road was a shredded wound. Vehicles burning, ammunition cooking off, figures running in random directions, some not at all. The recon leader let out the kind of breath men don't talk about later. Command picked the right side, one of the soldiers muttered. Or they just got lucky, another replied. Shawl didn't say anything. He just felt the scarf tight against his skin and realized how thin the margin had been. Back at the command post, nobody celebrated. They just updated the map and moved on to the next crisis. But the drone operator, when he finally stepped out of his metal box for a smoke, couldn't shake the image of that flickering pattern on a grainy screen. He stared at his cigarette for a moment, then muttered to no one in particular. Grandma's scarf, huh? Today it beat the software. That night, in the dugout, Shawl unwound the scarf again. New dirt, new smears. A fresh tear where something sharp had grazed it. It wasn't just a memory anymore. It wasn't just a habit. It had become a signal. A crude, fragile, human-made IFF tag in a war where technology kept failing at the worst possible moments. He folded it, slower this time, and tied it back around his wrist. The others were already half asleep, boots still on, rifles within reach. Over this quiet, cramped darkness, a narrator's voice could cut in. The front no longer looked like a line. It looked like a storm, chaotic, shifting, swallowing its own. In that storm, a single strip of fabric had just decided whether a tree line lived or died. But the real test for that scarf was still ahead. When it wouldn't be about one barrage on the horizon, but about a full artillery strike aimed straight at them. By the third month, nobody could say exactly where the front line was. Maps said one thing, reality said another. What didn't change was this. If you showed up in the wrong grid at the wrong time, your own side could kill you faster than the enemy. Shawl's team knew that better than anyone. Days after the convoy strike, they were sent out again. Same direction, same broken landscape, different task. This time, they weren't just eyes. They were the tripwire. Enemy units were regrouping. There were rumors of a push. Artillery needed precise corrections. Drones couldn't see everything through low clouds and smoke. The order was simple and cruel. Get close. Mark where they're staging. Stay there as long as you can. When we start hitting them, don't move unless we tell you. If you move without telling us, we might erase you with them. They went anyway. They moved through ruins that used to be houses, through orchards that were now just burned sticks, past a children's playground whose metal frame was twisted by blast and heat. At some point, the landscape stopped being recognizable. It turned into shapes, pits, shadows, nothing that could be called by its old name. By late afternoon, they were in position, a shattered strip of trees and rubble overlooking a wide open area. Farther out, the enemy was busy. Trucks, dugouts, men hauling ammunition, an armored vehicle half hidden behind a mound of dirt. It was the kind of scene artillery crews dream about. The recon leader keyed his radio. "Command, this is recon. We have eyes on a staging area. Multiple vehicles, infantry, possible armor. Sending grid now." He rattled off the numbers, slow and precise. Shaw listened, marking landmarks in his head. If the radios died, he'd still know where they were, where death would fall. "Copy," Command replied, voice thinned by distance and interference. "Fire mission being planned. Hold position and be ready to adjust. Do not shift without reporting." The phrase again. Do not shift without reporting. As if reporting guaranteed anyone heard you. They settled in. Time blurred into a pattern of watching, whispering, quiet corrections over the net. A truck moved. They updated. Men gathered in a shallow trench. They updated again. The sky darkened by degrees. Clouds thickened. The wind picked up, carrying the distant echoes of someone else's battle. Somewhere above, a drone tried to hold position against the wind, its feed already struggling. In the command post, the situation was just as messy. Multiple units were calling for fire. Multiple sectors were in motion. Icons jumped on screens with every small GPS error and signal interruption. Someone shouted over the noise. "Sector Echo is collapsing. We need immediate cover on their withdrawal route or we lose that flank." "Delta is already in the queue," another replied. "We hit them next, or their push rolls straight through our line." In that argument, Shawl's team in the enemy staging area became just one more item in a long list. "Recon team in Delta still holding?" a senior officer asked. "Last confirmation says yes," came the answer. "But comms with them are rough, lots of gaps." "Drone?" "On station, but picture is bad. Wind and jamming. They're barely holding a lock on the sector." The officer stared at the screen. "The enemy is massing down there. If we don't smash that, we'll pay for it tomorrow. And the day after." "And recon?" someone asked quietly. He didn't answer right away. Then, "If they're in the wrong place when the fire lands, they die with the rest. They knew that when they went in." On the ground, Shaw and the others watched the enemy settle into evening routines. Some men smoked, some checked weapons. Engines idled. A few vehicles shifted position, trying to hide behind shattered buildings. The recon leader checked his watch, then his radio. Command, this is Recon. Any update on fire mission status? Static. Crackle. Then half a sentence. Priority. Heavy fire elsewhere. Stand by. Corrections later. Later, one of the team muttered. We're lying next to a bomb and they say, later. Shaw said nothing. He could feel the tension like a cramp in his jaw. His scarf was wrapped tight on his wrist, almost cutting into the skin. Minutes crawled. The first sign something had gone very wrong was not a voice on the radio. It was the earth. The ground under them shivered, faint at first, then stronger. A low, rolling vibration coming from behind. Artillery, big guns, firing in sequence. Every man in that tree line knew the difference between incoming enemy fire and their own. This was theirs, from their side, heading in their direction. The recon leader grabbed the radio. Command, this is Recon. Confirm fire mission grid. Say again, confirm grid. The answer was a storm of noise. Delta, saturation, all movement in sector considered hostile, time on target, seconds. Shaw's vision tunneled. All movement in sector considered hostile. They were movement. The enemy was movement. To someone looking at a shaky drone feed and a glitching map, they were all just shapes in the same cursed square. The recon leader's voice changed. The training dropped out of it. Negative, command. We are in that sector. Friendly recon inside that grid. Abort or shift. Say again, abort or shift. The reply came back chopped and delayed. No confirmation, no visual, recon status unknown. Fire mission locked, cannot cancel. In the command post, it was brutal and simple. The officer had a choice. Believe a broken, fading voice from a unit that might already be dead or captured. Or believe the doctrine that said, if you don't kill this massing force now, they will kill more of yours later. The drone operator squinted at his screen, fighting motion blur and pixelated shadows. I can't separate them, he said. The team, the enemy, they're all in the same mess of cover. Wind's killing the feed. I can't mark them cleanly. Time, the officer asked. Seconds, the artillery liaison answered. They're already in the air. Last chance is to shift the center a little, but somebody in that square is getting hit. Back in the tree line, Shaw heard the words no one ever wants to hear from his own side, even as a fragment. All movement in the area, hostile until proven otherwise. Proven otherwise. How do you prove anything when voices drown in static and the only thing the sky sees is silhouettes? He understood with a strange calm that they were about to be killed by people who, somewhere far away, were trying to help them. He looked at the others. One was praying under his breath. One was swearing. One just stared ahead, eyes already gone somewhere else. The recon leader was still shouting into the radio, voice breaking. We are friendly. Repeat, friendly forces in the tree line. You hit us, you're killing your own. No answer. Only the steady growing roar of incoming rounds. Shaw's mind flicked back for a heartbeat to his grandmother's house. Steam over potatoes, her hands tying the scarf around his neck. So yours can always see you, she'd said. So yours can see you. If radio couldn't do it, maybe sight still could. He yanked the scarf free from his wrist. Stay down, he shouted at the others. What are you doing? Someone snapped. They don't hear us, Shaw said. His own voice surprised him with how steady it sounded. So they're going to have to see us. He looked around, found the highest piece of broken structure near them, the wreckage of a burned-out vehicle half buried in dirt. If he climbed it, enemy shooters could pick him off. If he didn't, his own artillery would tear all of them apart anyway. He moved. Shaw, get back down, the leader barked. If they don't know we're here, he shot back, we're dead in 20 seconds either way. He scrambled up the twisted metal, boots slipping, hands grabbing for jagged edges. Above the low cover, the wind hit him full in the face, carrying dust and distant screams. He climbed until he had nothing left to stand on. Then he raised the scarf. He gripped it in both hands and held it up high, letting it snap and flutter in the wind. A stupid strip of village fabric flying like a flag over a doomed position. From the enemy's side, it probably looked insane. From his own side, it was the only color in a world of gray. Far above, the battered drone fought the wind and shook its way across the sky. On the operator's screen, the image smeared and jumped. Shadows moved. Explosions flashed on distant edges. Come on, he muttered. Come on, give me something. Then, for just one moment, the camera stabilized enough. There. A single figure, standing where no one should be standing, on the carcass of a ruined vehicle. In his hands, a ragged strip of patterned cloth whipped by the wind. Not pixels, not an artifact. A shape the operator had seen before. "I've got him!" he shouted. "I've got Shawl! Tree line is friendly. I repeat, tree line is friendly. You hit that, you're hitting our recon." At the command post, everything collided at once. Artillery time on target ticking down, other sectors screaming for fire, one operator yelling about a scarf. The officer had less than a breath to choose. Doctrine said, trust grids, not feelings. Experience said, grids glitch, men die for it. He chose. "Artillery, this is command," he snapped. "Shift fire! Pull the center 40 meters forward. You do not hit the tree line. That tree line is friendly. Repeat, you do not hit the tree line." On the guns, men moved faster than they thought a human body could move. Corrections shouted, angles tweaked, barrels adjusted. It was almost too late. On the ground, in the tree line, the incoming rounds were close enough now that the air itself felt like it was shrinking. Shawl stood on the wreck, arm muscles burning, the scarf a bright, frantic wound of color in the gray. Time stretched. For a second, nothing existed except wind, fabric, and the knowledge that the sky was full of metal with his name on it. Then the world exploded. The first shells hit. Not on them, just in front of them. The earth in the enemy staging area lifted and turned into fire. Trucks vanished. Men disappeared into clouds of dirt and shrapnel. The shockwave hit Shawl a moment later, slamming into his chest, throwing him backward off the wreck. He crashed down into the tree line, all air punched out of his lungs. Above him, the sky flickered with new impacts as the barrage walked its way across the open ground, shredding the staging area, skipping the narrow band of trees by what felt like a miracle, and was in reality an overworked officer trusting one operator and one scarf. The team clung to the earth until the storm passed. Silence returned in jagged pieces. Someone coughed, someone groaned, someone laughed once hysterically, then bit it back. The recon leader rolled onto his side, chest heaving. "Sound off," he rasped. Voices answered one by one, all of them. Shawl blinked grit out of his eyes. The scarf lay next to him, half buried, torn nearly in half, edges burned, print smeared with dirt, and in one corner, blood. He didn't know whose. One of the soldiers dragged himself closer, looked at the scrap of cloth, then at Shawl. "You're insane," he croaked. "Completely insane." He swallowed, then added, "But if we had one brain between us, we'd all be wearing one of those now." A weak laugh rippled through the team, the kind that comes when the body doesn't know whether to shake from fear or relief. They pulled back before dawn, moving like old men, every muscle and nerve used up. At the command post, nobody pinned medals to anyone for a scarf. But word traveled anyway, about the recon group that almost got erased by their own barrage, about the idiot who climbed on top of a wreck under enemy guns just to wave a piece of cloth at a drone, about the fact that it worked. Weeks later, on a different rotation, a young soldier stood in a dusty staging area, tying a small strip of bright fabric to his gear. "Superstition?" someone asked him. He shrugged. "Call it that if you want. I call it one more chance for my own to recognize me." Far away from that staging area, on a quiet day no artillery touched, an old woman sat by a window in a village house. She looked at an empty chair, at a scarf folded neatly on the table, another one with the same pattern. She had no idea that somewhere, far beyond her fields, a shredded twin of that scarf had once held back the fire of a full battery. Over the image of that torn fabric, tied again around a wrist despite everything, a narrator's voice could say, "In war, maps are suggestions, radios lie, and technology fails at the worst possible moment. But sometimes, the smallest human thing, a ridiculous village scarf, can cut through the chaos louder than coordinates." That day, 8 men walked out of a grid that was supposed to be turned into a crater, not because the system saved them, but because someone, somewhere, remembered to look for one impossible splash of color in a world that had forgotten what color was.